Welcome back. A recent New York Times article caught our eye. It examines the rise of small worker advocacy groups popping up across the country and now getting some supersized pushback from big business. These are the groups that organize the Black Friday protests, fast food worker walkouts, and other unusual but attention-grabbing stunts. One of the largest groups, the Restaurant Opportunity Center, put a 12-foot-tall inflatable cockroach outside one of New York's fanciest restaurants and has staged protests at others during busy meal times, claiming misappropriated tips, unpaid overtime, and other discrimination. The group reached settlements with several chefs, one for more than $1 million. And because of results like that, now some powerful employer groups are fighting back, trying to squash them like, well, cockroaches. They claim that these worker centers are actually a front for unions and should be regulated differently. Saru Jayaraman is the co-founder and co-director of the Restaurant Opportunity Centers United and joins us from San Francisco. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, I want to start with the big picture, which a lot of people know, that the share of the union labor force is declining. It's down to 11%. That's the lowest since 1916. Where do your groups fit in a labor force that has less unions?
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to fill the gaps, and in particular, we're actually creating new models that allow workers to come together in different ways with other stakeholders. Employers, actually, we also organize employers who are doing the right thing, providing good wages and good working conditions. Consumers, a lot of the organizations like ours that are kind of new and newly emerging are engaged in very different tactics than unions or the unions of the past. They're really trying to put out a frame of collective prosperity, the idea that if these workers do well, many of whom are the lowest wage workers in America and also don't have any union support, if these workers do well, actually employers do well and consumers as well.
Well, and Saru, as you know, there is a real concern among the business community who argue that worker centers should face the same restrictions as labor unions under the law. And in this article, the vice president of the National Restaurant Association put it this way: they're trying to have it both ways. They're a union and not a union. They're organizing workers but not organizing workers. They have a history of tactics unions could not get away with. So why not just be more transparent?
Well, we're not a union. As I said, we organize not just workers, but also employers. We have about 100 restaurant owners across the country that are part of our network and several thousand consumers. So those are things unions don't do. We don't seek collective bargaining agreements. Those are things unions don't do. There's nothing wrong with being a union. Unions have done amazing things in the United States to raise wages and working conditions for low-wage workers, but that's not who we are or what we're trying to do at the moment. I think the real issue here is that the National Restaurant Association is very afraid that we're actually getting the message out there, messages they don't want heard. Messages like the fact that the minimum wage for tipped workers in the United States has been stuck at $2.13 an hour for the last 22 years. We've been exposing that these are mostly women living on food stamps, unable to put food on their families' tables. They don't want these messages heard, and so they're trying to attack us any which way they can, just labeling us a union or trying to stigmatize us in some way, and it's just not working.
Well, and part of the problem is that the regulatory environment, the legal environment for unions has become so difficult. In my view, it's part of what has led to the decline in unionization and also led to this situation where workers have essentially no power, right? You have this totally unequal power relationship between the worker and between their employer. And so I see your organization and others as doing a great job to try to fill that gap. But I wanted to ask you, given the nature of that unequal power dynamic, are workers frequently nervous about joining with your group, about speaking out about conditions that they aren't satisfied with or that may be discriminatory or illegal at their workplaces? Are they fearful of getting involved?
Absolutely. I mean, workers are always, that's true throughout the history of the United States. There have been times when workers have been afraid to come forward, other times when workers succeed. I would actually say this is a moment of great opportunity where we're seeing a lot more workers, low-wage workers, come forward and demand change. We've seen that with the fast food strikes. We've seen that with our Walmart. We've seen it in our own campaigns. Right now, workers across the country are organizing in Darden restaurants. Darden is the world's largest full-service restaurant company. They own Capital Grille Steak Steakhouse, Longhorn Steakhouse, Olive Garden, Red Lobster. Workers in many different companies right now are standing up more than we've seen really over the last decade. It's an incredible moment. So yes, there is tremendous fear, but at this moment we're seeing tremendous opportunity, and also workers really coming forward, feeling very empowered by seeing other workers across the country stand up.
A lot of these issues you write about in your great book, Behind the Kitchen Door, where people can get more information about this whole thing. They check that out. And one of the things that I was proud of you for taking on some high-class restaurants in New York City, which have discriminatory practices, which we notice if we dine there, that the front of the house workers tend to be white and the behind the kitchen door workers tend to be brown. And when those brown workers who have experience try to move up, then a lot of times the door closes for them.
That's right. There's pretty severe occupational segregation by race and discrimination in our industry. In fact, there's a $4 wage gap between white workers and workers of color. But let me say that the bigger, one of the biggest issues in our industry is that actually all workers of many different races face severely low wages in our industry. White workers, people of color, immigrants, non-immigrants. This is the lowest paying industry in America, and we're seeing severe poverty across the races. So yes, in fine dining, we need to address this issue of occupational segregation. Nationwide, we need to lift wages as well, particularly for tipped workers, as I said, whose wages have been stuck for so long.
Right, and that goes to Crystal's point in this larger debate about inequality. Is our inequality at this point an inevitable product of market efficiency, or does it have something to do with the way we organize power in this country? I mean, that's a key question. Saru, thanks for your time today. And up next, speaking of Crystal, we have Crystal Ball's audition for Saturday Night Live. Stay tuned.